The term wizard can be thrown around a lot. Wizards make magic, can create life from the ether, and conjure things that are beautiful and sometimes monstrous. There aren't many wizards out in the world these days, but I know of one by name, and that name is Rick Baker. Rick Baker is a master of the monsters and a wizard of special effects. He's an artist and a visionary who made some of the most memorable creatures and effects to grace movie and TV screens of the last few decades. He's also an unabashed monster kid who has never lost his love and fascination for the classics. On today's episode of What Happened to This Horror Celebrity, we're meeting a wizard of the wicked and magician of monsters. No, really, he's here to talk to us as we reveal what happened to Rick Baker.
Before we continue with our video, here's a reminder to click the Store tab on any of our JoBlo channels and browse our collection of the latest and freshest designs in our merch store. Go get you some.
Rick Baker was born in 1950 to Doris and Ralph Baker. Baker was only a child, and due to this, was a bit more withdrawn growing up.
Odd choice for a 10-year-old to say that he wanted to be the guy who made monsters for a living, and they actually were supportive of that.
The family moved to California when Baker was very young, and it was there that Baker started his love affair with monsters. As a child, Rick Baker loved movies, and his parents were supportive of his creative interests.
I lucked out in the parent department, I was so lucky to have the parents that I had.
And when Baker was a child, his eyes beheld the first issue he would see of Famous Monsters of Filmland. For those who may not realize it, Famous Monsters was a key component of the childhood of many of our movie magicians. Forrest J. Ackerman gave an outlet to monster kids over the 60s and 70s, much like Fangoria would through the late 70s and 80s. Baker was hooked, and upon watching films like Frankenstein and the Wolfman starring Karloff and Lon Chaney Jr., as well as Lon Chaney Sr.'s turns in Phantom of the Opera and Hunchback of Notre Dame, he found a calling. As a teenager, Baker would start creating makeups and effects, doing small projects like Octoman and The Thing with Two Heads, eventually becoming an assistant to the legendary Dick Smith while making The Exorcist. Baker would work for the first time with John Landis on the B-movie man-in-suit classic, Schlock. He'd follow this up in 1974 with the legendary Larry Cohen by creating the terrifying mutated baby in It's Alive. Baker actually had his then-girlfriend wear the baby suit he'd created. He also made a puppet of the creature for reaction scenes. The same year he was making monster babies, Baker would create alongside Stan Winston the makeup for the CBS made-for-TV movie The Autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman. The duo would go on to win an Emmy for their work on this film. 2 years later, Baker worked with Carlo Rambaldi on the remake of the classic King Kong. The film had a star-studded cast and was the introduction to Minnie to Jessica Lange. It co-starred Jeff Bridges and Charles Grodin and would have a $24 million budget, releasing in December of 1976. Kong in this version would be a man in a suit as well as an animatronic. Due to numerous issues with the animatronic, though, the film would eventually have Kong mainly be a suited actor. That actor wound up being Baker himself. This version of the story would have Kong climbing not the Empire State Building, but the World Trade Center. Baker would continue honing his craft and working on various projects over the 70s. This would include one of my phobia movies, Squirm, Track of the Moon Beast, and the gooey and oh so wrong, The Incredible Melting Man. In 1977, Baker would join up with an up-and-coming filmmaker on a little project called Star Wars. The following year, he'd work with another icon of cinema, Brian De Palma, on the psychokinetic horror film The Fury, which starred Kirk Douglas as a father who has a psychically gifted son. He's trying to save him from a government agency who's trying to turn psychic children into weapons. Following a return to Star Wars with Empire Strikes Back, Baker would create one of the monsters he is most well known for, and with it, a film that has gone down as one of the best horror movies ever made. American Werewolf in London in 1981 would reunite Baker with John Landis, who would write and direct the film about two unlucky Americans who meet their fates on the moor. Baker's take on the classic werewolf was beyond anything ever seen at that time on cinema. The transformation sequence and the effects makeup still to this day are effective. None of this was digital, and the artistry is evident in every shot. Baker would win the first ever Academy Award for Best Makeup, the first for him, but not the last, for the movie. That wouldn't be the only werewolf film he would work on that year, though. He'd also consult on the Joe Dante classic, The Howling. 1981 was a great year for werewolves, obviously. And then, in 1983, crossed into an entirely new world of entertainment with what was surely one of my favorite moments growing up. The absolute king of pop, Michael Jackson, joined forces with John Landis and Rick Baker to create a long-form music video that was a nod to various classic horror films, including I Was a Teenage Werewolf and Night of the Living Dead. Thriller would incorporate the work of 40 makeup artists and would also include a rap sequence by one of the kings of horror, Vincent Price. Baker would even show up in the video as one of the zombies rising from the grave. Thriller would become a phenomenon and a touchstone of the 80s. It also helped turn the record of the same name into one of the biggest LPs of all time, and would have a making-of documentary as well. It would receive multiple award nominations and wins. And of course, today, there are still flash mobs of fans going around breaking into the entire dance sequence without warning. In 1984, Rick Baker would work with yet another horror legend in John Carpenter, where each would go into the science fiction genre with Starman. He'd also return to the Land of the Apes with his work on Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan, where he would help create the apes that would become Tarzan's new family. In 1985, Baker would join Landis again, this time on-screen in the Jeff Goldblum starring Into the Night, which would also have David Cronenberg and Dan Aykroyd as part of the cast. This fortuitous casting would be a big one for Rick Baker, not for the role itself, but for the fact that he would meet his future wife Sylvia on the set where she was working as a hairstylist. Baker would also create and design the iconic lion makeup for Ron Perlman's Vincent in Beauty and the Beast. The job description was, per Baker, "We need him to be a beast, a monster, but attractive to women." Baker went with a feline appearance and rock star hair/mane. He also wanted to be a part of the casting, as the person who was to be in the role would be wearing this makeup every day while filming. When Ron Perlman showed up, Baker knew he'd be the right fit, knowing he'd already done film work in makeup prior. After the series started, it was clear, even from Perlman's agent, all the ladies loved Vincent. In 1988, Baker would get another Oscar nomination for his work on the comedy Coming to America. He'd also create another variety of ape in the biopic Gorillas in the Mist. In 1990, he'd team up with Joe Dante again for the sequel to Gremlins, not only as an effects artist, but also a co-producer in Gremlins 2, The New Bat. In 1994, Baker would work with Tim Burton on what many consider Burton's best film, and it's certainly one of my favorites. Rick Baker brought back to life Bela Lugosi in the form of Martin Landau in Ed Wood. The combination of Baker's makeup and Landau's performance was uncanny, and it would win Baker another Oscar. Over the course of the 90s, Baker would continue being a major part of releases for films and snagging 2 more Oscars with The Nutty Professor and Men in Black. He'd also work with Peter Jackson in 1996 on the very much needs more love The Frighteners. In the 2000s, Baker started things off with a bang with How the Grinch Stole Christmas, creating the iconic makeup and designs for Jim Carrey's The Grinch and The Residents of Whoville. Again, Baker would take home a well-deserved Oscar for the film. In 2001, Baker joined back up with Tim Burton on the remake of The Planet of the Apes, where he designed some of the most beautiful ape makeups and creature works of the decade. He'd once again be a part of the on-screen cast as well. Throughout the early 2000s, Baker was working on major releases. This included Disney's The Haunted Mansion with Eddie Murphy, with whom he worked a number of times, and working with Ron Perlman again on the 2004 Hellboy. In 2008, he'd score another Oscar nomination, again working with Eddie Murphy on the comedy Norbit. That same year, Baker would transform Robert Downey Jr. into Kirk Lazarus, an actor committed to his role as Lincoln Osiris for the over-the-top insanity that will forever be Tropic Thunder.
I don't believe you people.
Huh? What do you mean, you people?
In 2010, Baker would follow directly in the footsteps of his hero Jack Pierce when he joined the retelling by Universal Studios of their classic monster story, the Wolfman. This time, Benicio del Toro would play the tortured and cursed Lawrence Talbot, with Anthony Hopkins as his equally cursed father. Personally, this is one of my favorite things Rick Baker has ever done, and it's one of the most beautiful werewolf makeups I've ever seen. It's a bloody, beautiful, and amazing film that seems to be the baby of a Universal classic with a Hammer horror film. Baker gets gloriously murdered in it as well. The Academy appears to agree with my assessment, as that year Baker took home his 7th Oscar for his work. The following year, he'd present his mentor and friend Dick Smith with an honorary Oscar. After The Wolfman, Baker worked on 2 more projects for Disney, Tron Legacy, and the designer for Angelina Jolie's devilish fairy Maleficent. In 2012, he'd returned to Men in Black's universe for Men in Black 3. That same year, Rick Baker would get his own Hollywood Walk of Fame star. In 2015, Rick Baker retired from working on films as a special effects artist, but not as an actor. He would appear in Guillermo del Toro's The Strain as a victim of the vampires. He continues to appear in other projects and contributes to documentaries and commentaries. These days, Rick Baker is happy in retirement, creating amazing art and masks that he shares with fans on his Instagram. In 2020, Baker put together a massive tome of a book called Metamorphosis, which chronicles his work and career of around 40-plus years. It's a 2-volume set, and it's packed with images and behind-the-scenes photos from his various film projects and work. So that's what happened to Rick Baker, a monster kid forever. Rick Baker may have retired from the movies, but he's never ever going to retire from the monsters. He continues to make them and celebrate them every day. He is still a wizard, and we're lucky enough that he sat down with us to discuss a bit of his history. Thank you so much for joining us. I am very excited to pick your brain about your history and your work. And again, I absolutely love the work that you've been doing on Instagram lately, and just like the masks that you're producing and the way you're showing the process is so great. And I just love the Lugosi, of course, and the Cheney you've got back there too, because not enough love is given to London After Midnight.
Yeah, well, I'm having the best time. I got to say, it's funny on my Instagram, people always say, I thought you retired. And it's like, yeah, I retired from the film business, but I didn't retire from being me. And this is who I am. I retired so I can do this stuff. I was becoming a bitter old guy. Like I've seen so many people in the film, so many old people in the film industry, because you get screwed over so many times. And, it can be very frustrating, and I thought, I love, this is something I'm supposed to love and I'm supposed to be enjoying, and having the business and dealing with that didn't work for me now, so I just said, I'm getting out and I'm going to have fun again. So I feel like I'm a 10-year-old again. I'm making masks every day or painting or doing whatever I want. And it's great.
It's amazing. I was curious. I was going to ask you, would there ever be a project that would tempt you back to film if somebody came to you? What would it need to be?
I don't think there is. At first I thought, yeah, maybe if something special came along, or maybe I'll just do designs or consult. But I am enjoying my life so much the way it is now. My studio is the house next door to my house, so like, for example, last night, I was in bed and I was thinking about something that was printing and I wanted to check it. So I got up, walked across the yards, checked my printer, went back, and I went, this is perfect. I couldn't, if it was in my studio, miles away, that wouldn't be able to do that,
That's amazing.
But yeah, it's just, like I said, I feel like I'm a 10-year-old again. And, I don't want to change that.
No, I mean, you can tell the joy that you're having with it, and just the quality of it and the beauty of it. I can tell that you're having fun on those videos. Just the other thing too, I kind of hopping around. I wanted to ask you about the Halloween projects that you do with your family. I just think those are amazing. How you pull those off. How much work goes into those? Do you start planning the year prior?
Not the year prior, but usually halfway through the year, it's out of control. I mean, a couple of years ago, it was really out of control. We had a 14-foot tall set that they killed people putting it up, and I had all these, I made my daughter like Vampira, this one, and that was my other daughter, this weird freakish thick character. And yeah, it's kind of gotten out of control. I mean, that one I started, it used to be I would start in August, and that one I started in July. And I worked right up, I do like 12-hour days, 7 days a week. And I was working right up to the last minute on that one, and
Wow.
practically killed me. I mean, I'm out there, in the middle of the night, out there in the middle of the night doing stuff, I can't light it until it's nighttime, so, and it's kind of like a one-man show. I mean, I do the makeups, I do the sound, I do the lighting, I, figure out what this thing's going to be. And, but it's a blast, but I'm 73 years old, and it's getting harder to do this kind of stuff, so. And the other thing is we give out candy and we enjoy the kids, but lately we've been doing scarier stuff, and I want it to be dark because I want the lighting to be very specific. So we're talking about this year about doing something that's a little more kid friendly, because we love seeing the little kids in costumes, and we weren't seeing that so much with our scary stuff, so I'm not quite sure what to do this year. But we're gonna have to figure it out pretty soon.
Yeah, well, we do a big haunt at my house that we've been doing for like 20 years. Nowhere near the quality that you do, but we do a lot, and we've grown, and it's hilarious to me. I had the one year I dressed up as Billy from Saw, and I was on a adult trike in the full mask, the whole thing, and this little kid that had to be like 2 years old in a teddy bear costume. Her parents were with her, and she's just like looking at me, and I'm like, "Can I have a hug?" And the kid walks over, hugs me. It's this evil puppet character, and I'm looking like, you need to teach your child not to hug strangers.
Well, it's funny. I mean, it's the same thing with me, because I usually do scary stuff,
Yeah.
and you'll see little kids. I think you have to be taught that you're supposed to be afraid of some of this stuff,
Yeah.
and some little kids just like are just looking at me like, I'm fine, and I usually, if they start to look scary, I'll do a little something to let them know I'm okay. And then they're like my pal, and
Yeah.
it's I enjoy that, and we were missing that lately, but I mean, I live in Toluca Lake, and Toluca Lake is like Halloween town. I mean, people go nuts. There's thousands of people. It's the street that we do this on is solid people. I mean, it's like Disneyland Main Street.
Oh
We
man.
get thousands, usually at least 2,000 full-size candy bars, and they're usually gone in like an hour and a half, and it's like, and then we keep doing the show anyways, so.
Oh yeah, no, we've been doing, like I said, we've been doing it for like 20 years here, and now we have the kids that came prior bringing their kids, and boy, that's when you were like, oh my age, it just hit me. I've been doing this for a while. Ah.
Yep.
But I one thing I kind of talking about that and talking about kids, I wanted to ask you, can you remember the first horror or sci-fi movie you saw that really stuck with you that kind of may have spurred this on and your love of monsters?
I actually don't remember the very first one. I do know that, I mean, I would watch whatever horror movie was on, Saturday or Friday night, wherever, with their horror show hosts that we had, different ones that we've had. But I think what really encouraged it more than anything else was Famous Monsters of Filmland.
Story.
I'm an only child, and both my parents worked, and I was like a latchkey kid, and um, when my mom would come home from work and she'd go to the supermarket, she would take me with her, and I always kind of hated it. But one day I went and was looking at the magazine rack, and there was issue number 3 of Famous Monsters of Filmland, and I was like, "What is this?" And it says monsters on it, and I was thumbing through the pages, and it was an article, "Boy into Monster," and it had some makeup artist that did a not very good makeup on this kid, but it was like, "This is so cool." And Mom, can I buy this? And she wouldn't let me buy it, but I think I mean, oh shit, I keep keeping the tripod here. I think it was because And we didn't have the extra 35 cents. I mean, I grew up very lower middle class, and they didn't have the money. But I happily went to the supermarket with her every time after that,
And just
looking
read
for
it.
this magazine. Yeah, and I had saved money, so I had 35 cents. But it was like a freak thing that it showed up at that supermarket, because it wasn't until issue 6 that it showed up again, and I
Oh,
was ready, and I bought issue 6, and then through the back issues I bought issue number 3. So, but it was that more than anything that, I mean, I was always attracted to those films, science fiction and fantasy and horror films, but when I found out that somebody actually made that stuff and it's a job and all, I idolized Jack Pierce
oh
and
yeah.
Lon Chaney, and thought, what, I want to do this, and I was fortunate that I had really amazing parents who were very supportive of my strange hobby choice, and my dad was very creative and he encouraged the creativity, and my dad and mom also liked those kind of films, so I would go. I remember going to the drive-in in my pajamas when I was a little kid. I remember seeing 20 Million Miles to Earth, the Ray Harryhausen movie, with the Emer, and
Yep.
I actually went to the drive-in to see the reissue of King Kong, and it was with Godzilla, and Godzilla was first.
Oh
I
wow.
may have told you this last time. I don't remember, but I apparently I fell asleep during Godzilla, and it was like a Friday or Saturday. No, it was a Saturday night, and Sunday I woke up and my parents were sleeping in, and I got out some cardboard and paper bags, and I made what I thought was a King Kong suit, but it was a Godzilla suit. Then I woke up my parents and I go, "Look, I'm King Kong," and I go, "No, that's more like Godzilla. You didn't see King Kong, you fell asleep."
Oh my
So I remember those movies. I remember seeing beginning to the end at the movie theater. But I mean, my dad, told me about Frankenstein. He saw Frankenstein when it came out. He saw the Frederick March, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and he told me as a kid he would hide behind the seat and hide his eyes when you saw Mr. Hyde, and I couldn't wait to see it, and these were. I keep telling my daughters, we had a television set, it was about this big,
yeah.
and a TV guide that you would look through every day and every hour to try to find when a monster movie was going to be on, and
We didn't have
I remember,
VCRs.
no, you had to watch it when it was on,
Yeah.
and you had to know when it was on, and I remember seeing that Frankenstein was going to be on, and my parents had something, they were going to some friend's house, and they took me. And it was like, I want to see Frankenstein. And it was on pretty late, and we got home late. And my dad let me turn the TV on and watch a little bit of it. And it was the scene where Dr. Waldman was going to dissect him when the monster is unconscious on the table and then wakes up and kills Waldman and, lumbers around and leaves, and it's like, oh yeah, I saw Frankenstein, it was all I saw of it, but I was so excited by that, and
Well, and one
I mean,
thing that oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh,
No, you go ahead.
I was gonna ask, kind of the same thing with me. I was the younger kid. My sister was like 10, 11 years older than me. So, and I didn't really have a lot of people to hang out with. And I always found myself being friends with the monsters. And I was
Yeah.
curious if that's kind of what you gravitated towards them as well, because as you said, you were only child, uh, you could get that sense from Frankenstein of the loneliness or, like feeling kind of like an outsider, because horror fans tend to be the outsiders a lot.
hmm yeah, definitely. I related to the monster, and yeah, I think we're all that way. I mean, I think we're all kind of the misfits, and um, so for a while, really looked down upon too. I mean, my mother's brother, would always say, well, when is Ricky going to stop, playing with these monsters and do something and get a real job, and was real kind of negative about all that stuff. And this is kid stuff, and this isn't good, and it's like, But you know, I mean, the classic horror films are the ones that I really love. You know, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, Dracula, the Charles Laughton, Hunchback of Notre Dame, which I did
Yeah.
this little model of. You know, and the sympathetic monsters that you really could relate to and felt sorry for. You know, I'm not a big like slasher movie fan, and you know, kill as teenagers as many graphic ways as you can kind of fan. You know, but and you know, I you know, you relate to them. You know, like you said, you know, I only child. I was very shy. I had friends in the neighborhood, but I didn't play with them that much because I was in my room making stuff instead. You know?
No, I completely get it. And so one thing that I wanted to ask you about, which I don't know, I'm it's obvious that King Kong was a huge, huge love of yours. That you've done all of this work. You played King Kong. Um, what struck you about Kong and that story that made you just fall in love with the Big Eight? Because he's one of my favorites.
Yeah, again, my dad, you know, told me about King Kong, and he also knew what stop motion was and how it was done, which was cool. Um, I don't know specifically, you know, I just tended to like any gorilla in a movie, and I became fascinated with the whole concept of a man in a gorilla suit, and I always say, you know, I liked fooling people with my makeup, and a little kid Frankenstein didn't fool anybody. I didn't get the response I wanted, so then I went through a whole like blood and guts phase when I was young. And that got a response from people, you know, when you did a blood makeup and you know, or you made up some neighbor kid and you ran home, you know, and it scared the shit out of his parents, and then I was not allowed to play with him anymore. You know, it was kind of a thing. And I just thought, okay, well, maybe this should be the end of my blood and guts period, but what can I do? How can I fool somebody with my makeup? You know, and I thought, you know, I think I could build a gorilla costume that really looked real, you know, and I made that my mission. And you know, I couldn't do you know, the very first suit that I made was on you know, no budget suit, you know, uh, really crappy fake fur. The only thing that was available at the time, shiny black stuff. And I had a suit that I wore overalls with, like the George Barrows, who was on the Beverly Hillbillies in one episode that had these overalls on, you know. And uh, I would put the suit on and go to the local park and climb up in a tree. And I joined some parades that I wasn't supposed to be in. I had a friend drive me to a parade, and I'd jump out and just get in the parade and walk down the street with everybody else, you know. And, but and some people even believe that the very first suit was real, you know, and I like that. So I made it my mission to, you know, build a realistic gorilla suit. So it wasn't just King Kong, you know, uh, but yeah, Kong was always one of my favorites. The original King Kong is such a great art piece of art. You know, I mean, the shots are beautiful. You know,
Yeah.
the jungles that they created with the glass paintings and stuff were so great. And when in the 70s, when John Landis said to me, you know, there's some Italian producer is going to remake King Kong. And then I was going, oh man, what a mistake. And I said, they're probably going to get some idiot and put him in a gorilla suit, you know. And I was right. You know?
Well, and you brought up the classic Universal Monsters films, and I just, you know, like I said before, I that's my go-to for everything. Like if I want to go to sleep at night, I'll turn on a classic Universal flick, and it just is a little warm blanket for me. And the part of the thing with those is I've never seen any, even Hammer has its own style, but those Universal monster films were like fairy tales come to life. There's some look to them, the beauty of them, the monsters, the actors. I it's what in your mind makes them so special? Because I've yet to see another you know, even the remakes can't even touch them.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, you know, all the right people were involved, it seems, you know, and uh, I it's so funny because, you know, I'm right near Universal. Um, and that for me was the dream place to work. You know, they made the movies that I loved, and I had worked there numerous times. You know, and uh, it's so amazing to be, the when I did How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the stage that Whoville was on was the stage that Frankenstein's castle, was there. You know, and it's just I get such a cool feeling just walking around the lot, knowing that Jack Pierce and Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi and all those guys were probably standing in the very spot that I am now. You know, and
That's
we
amazing.
filmed we filmed some of the Nutty Professor on the Phantom of the Opera stage, which unfortunately now is gone, which I was really upset about. You know, I kept it all these years until just
Yeah.
recently. But I was walking all around. I climbed all the way up to the top and was looking a for see if it said Lon Chaney was here somewhere written down. You know, and actually there were broken pieces of the ornamental stuff for the boxes in the opera house, I think from the Northridge quake, and they were just covered black with dirt and dust up way up high. And I thought, I think I'm going to take one of these pieces. You know, nobody's going to know. You know, they don't even know they're up here. It's so I have a couple of pieces of the set. You know, I'm
Oh man.
stuck in my car, and now it's all torn down. You know, so I'm really
Yeah.
thankful I did. But yeah, I mean, the same thing there. It's kind of like comfort food. You know, I mean, the funny thing now, you talked about the Universal classics. I to go to sleep now. It's either The Day the Earth Stood Still, which I think is a great film,
That's a great movie.
and it's really time for Klaatu to come down and straighten out the world. I'm sorry, you know,
Amen.
please come Klaatu and straighten us out.
Take
But
us
yeah,
away. Take us
yeah,
with you.
but it's also the brain that wouldn't die is in the other one that I listen to at night. You know, to go to sleep. And what's good about it is, you know, there's a little bit of dialogue and there's a whole bunch of music for a while when he does the car crash and picks up the head and goes in. You know, and
Yeah.
usually just kind of lulls me off to sleep. You know, and to a happy place.
Well, and one thing I wanted to ask you about too was I'm always curious about special effects artists and how their process with creating a creature. And I'm curious about how much biology goes into your thought process when you're making a monster. If, you know, in hand with the art. Do you think about, okay, what would an actual werewolf look like and how would their musculature go and that kind of a thing?
Yeah, I mean it depends on the project. You know, sometimes there is a lot of research, and you look in, for example, werewolf. You know, I look at the anatomy of a wolf or a dog, and then looked at the anatomy of a human, and you know, in American Werewolf, when we did the transformation, it was I bought a dog skeleton
Oh
and
wow.
did kind of a comparative anatomy thing to a human skeleton. Said, okay, well, these, you know, the bones, these metacarpals or whatever they are, uh, you know, are longer, you know, so let's stretch that part out, you know, and same thing on the feet, you know, you give that dog leg kind of joint, you know, and you know, sometimes you just make the shit up, you know, it's just like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm just going to start pushing clay around and, oh, that's pretty cool, you know, and then, you know, now when it became, you know, I started using Photoshop to do designs when it was Photoshop 1.0, and loved that and would do just play and go, that's cool, you know, and I like this part. I'm going to cut that out and paste it on this one. And then, you know, it's just, you know, combining things that you see. I have a giant library filled with books that I don't even look at anymore, you know, but it used to be looking at these animal books and find things that inspire me, you know. Uh, Now you do on the internet, you know, it's easier to just type in, you know, moon butt and there's a picture, you know, you don't have to go through a bunch of books to find, you know, whatever, you know. So um but yeah, it's sometimes it's you do a lot of research and it's based on very specific real world things, and sometimes you just make it up, you know.
Esque movie with
You know, but for years I've been saying, I would like to see a remake of A Man of a Thousand Faces, and I said, uh, when I saw Bryan Cranston, I thought Bryan Cranston should be Lon Chaney, and he would be great, and I actually I went to I saw him at a Comic-Con, him and Vince Gilligan, and I told him, I said, I would like to do this, and he actually came over for they both came over for dinner. We talked about it,
Oh
and
my gosh.
but uh, people don't know who Lon Chaney is. Some kid isn't going to be interested in it, and old people don't go to the movies, so it's like, but I would love to see it, and he
I
would be
would, I
great.
would, I would watch that. Oh my God. Now that
Yeah,
you said that, I can't get that out of my head. He would be
yeah,
perfect.
yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
God.
No, I
Well,
mean, the funny thing is, I mean, he's actually, I think he's like too old now, but Chaney looked old, way too young. I
yeah,
mean, he died in his
he,
50s.
he, he ruined his face.
Look over the island now. So
Well, Rick, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. I love talking with you. I'm so happy you joined this episode. It's just great to talk to you and geek out about monsters. And is there anything that you would want to share with everybody, that all the fans out there that are going to be watching this?
Well, first of all, they should follow me on Instagram if they don't already, because I post a lot of fun stuff, and especially if you're a monster kid, you'll appreciate it. Like this was I just got this off the printer this morning, a creature in Black Lagoon that I did a sculpt for a mask, but I scanned it and did a little 3D print. But
That is so
I'm, recreating, the monsters that made me. So I'm loving that. And also, if they don't have my book, they should get that, like you
yes.
should.
Yep. Yes. He's
It,
guilting me now,
it's
but it's
it's
huge
not
and
it's not the
beautiful.
cheapest book there. It's got a decent price on Amazon, but it's a really well-made book. So I mean, they have to charge a certain amount of money for it. But if you're a fan of my stuff, it's over 2,000 photographs and basically my life story in there too.
And you said it was
Um,
17 pounds.
it's 17 pounds. Yeah. Yeah. So you don't want to have to buy it and carry it for a long ways. I did a couple book signings where people brought the books and were carrying both books and carrying them.
Oh my God.
Just put them on the ground until it's time to come over here. Yeah, I
A
know just from moving
newborn.
crazy, but yeah, I mean, um, I I just glad to know there's still people that like this stuff out there, and uh, I personally think, I, so many people think that if you're into these films and all that, that you're an evil, bad person, But I've found almost all the Monster Kid people and all the fans of these things that I've met are the nicest people, and we accept who whatever color or whatever disability or whatever sexual orientation, and we're this group of people. I think if the whole world was filled with monster kids, it'd be in better shape than it is now, which is in
Amen.
pretty bad shape now. And I personally, I mean, I don't watch the news because it just puts me in a bad place, and I want to wake up happy and make monsters,
Yeah.
so I don't do that. I don't watch the news, and I live in my fantasy world of where everybody loves everybody, and I create every day, and I think that people who make things have a real appreciation for life and stuff, and I just wish everybody was creative and not destructive, and
Yeah,
um,
the creators are the ones that, when you make things like this, when you bring things to life, it's a lot, it's hard to figure out why you want to destroy stuff. That's
yeah.
what I look at it. Like, you know, you're making something, art, a creature, a creation that, when you
And
look
it's
at,
fun. I just don't know what normal people do to entertain themselves. I mean, like I said, I pretty much work 12 hours a day, maybe 10, but a part of it is because, like I said, I'm 73 years old. I've got
you do not
arthritis in
look
my hand.
73, by the way, at all. Not at all.
It's the filter, not really. But I have arthritis in my hands. I have arthritis in my feet. I had cataract surgery in both of my eyes. and I know that there's an end in sight, and it's going to be here before I know it. And I just want to make as much stuff as I can while I still can, because I know when the time comes when I can't, it's gonna kill me. This is how I have fun. I think this is why I was put on this planet, is to make this stuff. And I just hope I can until the day I die. So.
Aw. Well, I don't want to think about you dying, but I hope you do keep making. I want you to keep making until you can't make anymore, because the stuff you make is magic, and you are a wizard. So
Well,
that's how I see you. Is you are a wizard of monsters. So
Wizard of
again,
yeah.
but
Well, yeah. I just feel like the luckiest guy. That my hobby of making masks, turned into a job that got me fame and fortune, and allowed me now to retire and still be able to make stuff and
yeah.
have a good life.